Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you may be tuning in from. It's the week of Thanksgiving, and hopefully everybody's having an exceptional week. And we get to enjoy a very, very nice, probably one of the most important holidays that we have in the year. At least that's what I think. But welcome to Truck Around and Find Out. I am Keith Couch with Rocky Mountain Peterbilts on YouTube, Rush Truck Starting out of Greeley, Colorado. And you are?
I'm Ryan Byers. Welcome, everybody. I'm the owner of Front Range Compliance at DOT University. Thank you all for joining us today. Hopefully we have a fun topic in store for you.
Yeah, but we're missing Redbeard.
We are. Keith, he showed up this morning and walked through the door and greeted me with a nice shade of pale green. And my greeting to him sounded like he'd been on an all-nighter and said he was feeling better. He just needed coffee, and I heard him make coffee. And about 10 minutes after that happened, he was making some awful sounds from the bathroom, and he came out of there. I just said, leave. Whatever you got, I don't want. So
don't touch anything, leave.
And I cleaned everything with alcohol wipes before you got here, so hopefully it's a safe space for us.
Well, Luke, hope you get to feeling better.
Yeah, bud, we hope you get to feeling better.
So what are we talking about
today? Today we're going to be jumping into, so we're coming back. We're circling back here to this English Speaking Proficiency and the CDL issues. These are some major hot topics. It's all over the media. It's all over the community. When I'm listening to the different radio shows on Road Dog, listening to different talks, it's even coming up on different other talk radio. It's been a very hot topic right now. And there's a lot of concerns, and I think people are just kind of living right now in the unknown. So I wanted to circle back to that and talk about some of the meetings I was at last week, where we got to meet with some representatives from the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, some representatives from the Colorado State Patrol here, and from our Colorado Department of Revenue, the CDL unit. They all had some points to kind of make with that. So I was kind of wanting to circle back and talk about some definite things that are going to happen and some of the unknown that we're seeing in some of that right now.
Hey, where did you meet them? Was that CMCA?
Yeah, that was at last week's meeting at the safety meeting for the Colorado Motor Carriers Association. Yeah. That was the topic of discussion. They had it opened up for live, and we also had it opened up for some people joining on Zoom. I don't really know how many folks were joining us on Zoom. I will say that our safety meetings are down. People just aren't attending like they have been. And I would encourage anybody listening to this, if you're not a member of CMCA, you definitely should. They are the voice of the trucking companies here in Colorado or even nationally. When there's some bad law, things that are really going to be detrimental and difficult to the trucking community.
And I think every state has a. They do. When you hear us say CMCA, for short, that's Colorado Motor Carriers Association. We've got a very good Motor Carriers Association here in Colorado, which Ryan's a big part of.
Yeah, well, I would argue that we have the best association. They've actually, I think, won the top awards for the association like 10 or 12 years in a row.
Wow.
I mean, they're very highly recognized for the work that they do in this industry.
But I think every state has one.
They do. They definitely do.
And to make yours better in your state, get involved.
Absolutely.
The more people we can get involved, the better those things get. So those are associations that are fighting for you.
Yeah, agreed completely. So in this meeting, basically what was discussed when we had CVSA there, they are the entity that sets the standards for the North American Standard out of service criteria. So they essentially work directly with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, and so with all the changes that we've seen with the non-English speaking driver, or I should say the English proficiency, there's definitely been some changes. In our past podcast, I mentioned kind of what happened, and we kind of brought up, hey, what they're going to do, and we brought up the memorandum we had, but this time we actually had somebody there to actually speak to that memorandum and tell us exactly nationwide how this is going to be handled by enforcement personnel, and it's going to be done in a two-part system. So when the officer pulls that driver over, they're going to be going through the two stages with that driver. And with that, we're really kind of looking at that first part is going to be a driver interview. So I guess we take that, going back to my enforcement days back when I was a trooper, that's the individual, you're going to walk up, introduce yourself, advise the reason why you pulled them over, what's going on. You're going to ask for all the credentials, your driver's license, your medical card, your ELD, all of the things. And then at one point, the officer is going to make a determination. Am I speaking with somebody that can understand English or they can't understand English, as that goes. And that is when the officer, they can make a determination. They're permitted during a traffic stop to, if they know the second language, the officer is permitted to speak in that language. To make it easier to get through for safety and convenience in that. But for this stage, the determination of can the driver speak English, this stage must be conducted in English, no matter what. So they're the two parts. The first part's going to be the driver interview, and the second part is going to be the road signs and different things like that. So during that first part, the enforcement officer is going to conduct that in English and ask a series of questions. They're not publishing or they're not letting the industry know what kind of questions are going to be asked. But I think, Keith, between you and me, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's going to be like, who are you? Where are you going to? Where are you coming from? It's just going to be a basic interview that would be conducted with any driver, just going to be conducted in English, just to make that determination, what's going to happen and what those questions are. If the enforcement officer at that point, if they determine right then and there that there's no English, like the guy doesn't understand me, they're going to terminate the interview and they're going to go ahead and place the driver out of service at that point. They won't proceed on to the second part.
No need to.
Well, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
You already have your answer.
Yeah, and then the second part of this is going to be, they've satisfied the requirement, and when I say satisfy the requirement, it was actually brought up a couple times that when they said the English proficiency. They're not going out there and during that interview, they're not necessarily looking for like a score of 100%. They don't expect the individual to be perfect. They're really expecting the individual to put their best foot forward. And it was even brought up through that whole statement or through the conversation that we had in this meeting that, some individuals may actually speak better than they let on when they're nervous or when they get pulled over and then they get flustered. The officers they're supposed to be receiving training in regards to that, and advise the driver the best they can that it's in their benefit to conduct that interview. So I would say this to the trucking companies and the folks out there, encourage your individuals, your drivers, your employees, encourage them to take a deep breath and do their best to try to answer everything that they can in English, even if it's broken. As long as they have some communication and they're able to conduct that interview, they will be able to proceed on to the next step. But if it's a dead stop, very clear, the individual doesn't know, they're not going to make it to the second part of the interview, which, we can, with the second part of the interview, a driver should be able to handle that. So once they get to that second part, so if they don't get put out of service through those first conversations, the second part is going to be the sign identification. And that one, I find it really interesting, just simply because I know they're all going to, they're probably going to publish for enforcement eyes only, a board that's got all the same signs on it. That way it's the same across the board for the sake of consistency. But when they publish that sign, it can be the known traffic signs, but I think one of the interesting ones could be the electric signboard. So it's like, boy, I was kind of applying some thought to that. Like if I was an enforcement person and I was thinking like safety and I had a picture of a signboard, what are some signboards that I would use to see if the individual could, interpret what those are? And the things that pop up in my head would be like a lane shift, would be, like accident ahead or road closure, different things like that. So, we don't really know what we're going to see on that. But I think if there's a signboard with actual text on there, I kind of believe that's going to be probably the hardest to answer, especially if an individual is illiterate. or can't read, or read in English, whatever the case could be. But that is going to kind of be the issue. But they're going to have this page of signs, and when they expose those signs to that driver, they're going to essentially pick out 4 random signs, and they're going to point at those 4, and that is the driver must correctly identify 3 out of the 4 in order to pass and not be placed out of service. So it is set in stone. That is how they're going to go through and
my vote is for 4 out of 4.
4 out of 4. I think that's a good goal for sure. For sure. But yes, they do have to get that 75% score.
So if a driver is placed out of service, how long is the driver out of service?
That's an interesting question, because it kind of leads to a lot of discussion. I receive that question a lot here at Front Range Compliance, and I would say that one of the answers is, and to me it seems kind of obvious, the driver's being placed out of service for non-English speaking proficiency. So in order to get back in service, they have to bring forward their English proficiency. So that is, I sense, essentially the correct answer. The CVSA rep kind of hemmed and hawed on that also and said, well, there is no clear written guidance that says how long or how, when they're out of service until. I think it's implied, but it's not written per se. The one thing that I would like to caution, and this did come up in that discussion, is if a driver's placed out of service and a company makes a determination to go through and continue to use that driver, so it's the next day, sun goes down, sun comes back up, and you say, okay, hey, we need you to take this load from wherever. If that individual gets pulled over again and gets put out of service a second time, and the enforcement division, if they can identify that there's a previous out of service order on that driver for non-English speaking, and they get put out of service again for that second one, it would be a violation of an out of service order. And I think it's really important to note, when you go to the regulations and you read 383.51, specifically in table number 4, which talks about the violation of out of service order, that in itself, once there's a conviction of that in itself is going to be a suspension offense. So that driver is going to lose their CDL upon conviction for anywhere from 180 days to a year for their first offense, and the second offense will be up to 2 years to 5 years. So it is one of those interesting things.
So what happens to the company?
Well, the company, of course, for violating an out-of-service order would be looking at, if the feds can determine that under order that they violated, which would be constitute the second pullover, which would be knowingly violating that out-of-service order, they would be looking at civil penalties upward of $21,000 per violation. If the enforcement agent, if somebody takes enforcement, which that we could do an entire podcast on some of the conversations I've had recently with some of the feds on their enforcement policies. It's been very, very difficult for the FMCSA to level actual penalties as of lately for whatever reason or other. But they would be looking at a violation of an out-of-service order internally, which I think the most importantly is that would be an acute violation, which in turn would change a safety rating of a company. And if they're found to be unsatisfactory, then they are going to be shut down. They have a 60-day if they're non-hazmat, or a 45-day if they're hazmat to put forth a record showing that they've made their corrective actions. They're not going to continue to violate those situations. And if they don't get that in, they get forced out of service as a company. So there's definitely some repercussions. Fine-wise, that one's kind of up in the air right now, because FMCSA, look, if you're listening, y'all need to pull your heads out of your butts, because right now you got some serious issues going on with your civil penalties. And like I said, that's a discussion for another day, but definitely needs to be looked at. Yeah. So, yeah. Crazy stuff. It's just going to be one of those things. It's going to be a learning curve that we're kind of all on on our way are going to be learning along the way. So, the other thing I was really kind of hoping that we could talk about, Keith, today is this driver's license issue. Have you been keeping up with what's going on with that?
It's a pretty hot topic right now.
Oh man, it's everywhere. So the FMCSA, Sean Duffy, he jumped straight in and basically, I'm sure he's getting the push from the administration, and it's just a very hot topic. But they did a big crackdown on all the states that were issuing CDLs, and I know we've mentioned it in a past podcast that we definitely have seen, especially here in Colorado and some other states, where individuals that shouldn't have had a license issued to them, they did for one reason or another. Still cracks me up to this day to see licenses popping up with no name given as the name, and it's like, how is that even feasible? But anyways, they're cracking down on those. In that crackdown, it's a crackdown on anybody that's here that doesn't have the legal right to work in the United States, but it's also a crackdown on any temporary visa status. And here in Colorado, so the individual that was at this meeting from the CDL unit of the Colorado Department of Revenue had basically stated that here in Colorado, and it's going to be a little bit different in each of the states, but here in Colorado, it was anybody that does have a CDL issued to them. So if they've had one issued to them in the past, as that license expires, it will not be allowed to be renewed. So they're not just gonna cancel their licenses straight up. They're gonna let that license time out. However, anybody else that's here on a temporary visa, they will not be issued a CDL. So even if they're holding a CDL in their own country, but they're here on a temporary visa, they will not be issued a CDL here. So, and the current ones, once they expire, those are not going to be reissued. So that is going to be, kind of the way I think nationwide that we're going to be seeing this take its turn. But where there's the whole plot kind of thickens and gets deeper with everything that's going on there.
Yeah, and I think one of the articles we saw here was the CDL mills. So what's a CDL mill?
Well, that's funny. I the person that handed me this article asked me that exact same question, and the first thing I thought of is a puppy mill, and it's kind of the exact same thing. We've got these entities out there that are just issuing CDLs. When you read the article, it's going after both the states that are just giving CDLs to people that want them, but it's also going after the CDL schools. So as you all know, going back to, I think it was 2022, the entry-level driver training programs went into play for new CDL holders, where a driver needed to go through and complete a school satisfactorily. Well, since they've done that, of course, CDL schools just kind of came out of the woodwork. People you never heard of were starting their CDL schools. We had one here in Colorado that a bunch of my clients, unfortunately, had utilized to help some drivers get some CDLs, and it was determined that they weren't following the rules. And basically, the state of Colorado sent everybody that had been through their school a notice saying, "Hey, your CDL has been denied, and you're going to have to be retested." And they set up retest dates, and all those individuals had to go back in and redo their test to demonstrate proficiency. Some of them were able to get their CDL back, but some of them lost their CDL and had to go to a different school again. Well, essentially, that's kind of what they're going after. They're really taking a hard look at these CDL schools in these states, and they're basically, just saying, "Hey, if you're not following the plan, we're going to be coming after you and shutting you down." And essentially, that's the gist of this entire audit or this article that came up, that basically says that they did an audit that started on June 17th, and through that, they're discovering that states have been issuing CDLs and learner's permits to people that were designated U.S. citizens who were either foreign residents or in the U.S. illegally. So they were issuing CDLs to individuals that they should not have been, and the states have issued CDLs to people who lack proper work permits. And in some of the casings, it's just was straight up, they were flouting the law. They had a number of drivers with no license at all, which is they're saying, and that's been an issue for a long time. I mean,
well, for me, that's more believable.
Right.
Then you got a license that says no name.
Right, exactly.
I mean, just crawl in behind wheel of truck and go.
For sure. And I think that's still an issue. That's going to forever be an issue for enforcement. When you pull somebody over, they just don't have a driver's license, but they're doing it hoping that they don't get pulled over.
And it's like these crashes that we've seen. Somebody, probably at one of these schools, signed off to get that person a CDL. There's got to be some teeth in this for them, shouldn't it?
Well, absolutely, because I think it goes deeper than somebody just signing off. I think it all goes back to financial. What's the gain of the individual? I mean, if somebody's hosting a school and giving everybody a CDL that signs their name on the dotted line and pays them a couple $1,000s to get a CDL, and we're just pushing people through and they're getting their CDL without proper training and safety training, I think those individuals do need to be targeted as
they need to be held responsible. And, if you go to them and say, okay, why did you sign off on this guy? Here's your signature. You signed off to prove it. They should have to have a file on him and say, you passed all of this, to be able to back it up. To say, I'm sorry you had an accident, but he did everything he was supposed to.
Exactly. Well, and, we looked at, when that first all went up, we looked at doing a CDL school as part of front range compliance. And, when I looked at all the requirements and everything that became of it, I saw it was very clearly a business all in its own. And I just didn't have the wavelengths to do what we do and then also throw a CDL school together, because that's just it. It would have been just a thrown together CDL school, which is what all these other yahoos did out here. Not all of them. There's some good schools out there, but there's some of them are definitely fly-by-night operations. And the FMCSA, they're just promising that they're going to be cracking down on those, and that when they wrote the ELDT, the entry-level driver training rules, they wrote right in there that those individuals can be audited just like a trucking company. So with that means that the FMCSA can come to your door at any time under any authority and audit those records. So I think overall the companies have been put on notice with this. Within this article, it really kind of lays out, and within the words of Mr. Duffy, it is saying that companies that are on notice, they need to hire good qualified drivers. So take time when you're doing your qualifications, really look at how you're qualifying people, make sure that you're following all the program and that those individuals can come on and drive. Take them out for a road test, have a conversation with them, talk to them about the highway signs. I'm not saying you shouldn't hire somebody that has some broken English, but take time to train your individuals. Make sure that the people driving your trucks are qualified. Do your part to help make these roads a little bit safer. And driving schools, they're on notice. You need to follow these standards. It's cut and dry. The FMCSA laid the foundation and said, hey, if you're going to be doing a trucking school, you need your program has to meet this, this, and this. Follow the rule. Quit being greedy and try and take everybody's money, and just give anybody the credentials that pays you. Do your part and train them. Okay, the second article, Keith, that we had here was November 7th. It was the legal battle over the FMCSA, and this article was by Adam Wingfield of FreightWaves, and it's funny. It's dated November 7th, so it just came out week and a half ago, 10 days ago. And it just kind of it just lays the foundation. It says, hey, you know what? There's been a lawsuit that has been levied against the FMCSA because an individual was losing their CDL, and they're claiming in this lawsuit that the FMCSA violated their own rules because they didn't apply enough time for a comment process, and they're not justified declaring that there's an actual emergency right there. And then it kind of goes on. It says, hey, that the the FMCSA is estimating that this change is going to affect approximately 194,000 CDL holders, and they're going to be losing their license, their CDL as a part of this. So yeah, they levied that lawsuit. The lawsuit was leveled. I'm not going to get into the time of the person that did that. It does go through and state that this individual that levied this lawsuit reportedly lived in the United States since the age of 2 and has held their CDL license for over a decade. And the lawsuit claims that due to whatever his status was, that he's going to be unable to renew their CDL due to this new rule finding, which, he's been here. The individual's been here since they were 2. So I know there's programs, and I know it says he's had his CDL for over a decade. So he's got that. He's either 18 or 21, somewhere in that area. So I'm putting him at about 31 in my own head, and I'm saying if he's been here since he was 2, that means 30 years almost in the United States and no citizenship or anything else. And
he's had plenty of time.
Yeah, I'm like, I know in the last 30 years, many individuals from El Salvador, Mexico, somebody from Scotland that got their citizenship, and man, they were proud. So, and happy that they did it. So I'm just like, it's get with the program and follow the rules. So anyways, we got that article. And of course, the follow-up article that I brought forth to kind of talk about this is a follow-up to that lawsuit. It's on November 11th. So, 4 days later. And it's essentially just talking about how the Federal Court of Appeals 3-judge panel on November 10th, halts the rule, and they issue a stay, in regards to this regulation. So a stay doesn't mean it's over. It just means it's holding it for a much longer battle within that. So, but what that does mean is while the rule is stayed, that the FMCSA is basically on hold. They're not able to take these actions moving forward to the licenses. Some of the states like Colorado have already taken steps to do this. So I haven't received yet an answer of what the FMCSA the state of Colorado is going to do. But I think it all kind of depends if it goes from the Court of Appeals. It's probably next step is going to be the Supreme Court, and we'll see. We'll see what happens once it runs up into that area. So right now, the whole license being suspended is really kind of in limbo. So as far as that goes. So, I think overall it kind of leads me to really, my 3, I guess my own personal opinion that I have on this entire matters is, this first off, I think, in my time doing DOT work, since early 2000, I've just kind of seen how the ebbs and flows and the regulations, and over time, it just kind of I've kind of walked away with the impression that there's certain branches of government that have just kind of overlooked or loosened their, standards. We saw that with English speaking. They came out in 2007. They went hard on that, and then by 2014 to 2016, they kind of relaxed those standards. And when they relaxed those standards, I think since then they've just continued to relax a bunch of standards to the point that, now where we have the FMCSA can barely even level a civil penalty these days because of all the different standards that they've put to even, it's got to go to Washington, it's got to be overlooked, it's got to be looked at by the lawyers. It used to be cut and dry. We used to issue civil penalties, and I'd leave the company's office, I'd do the report, and the civil penalty would go that way. But it's just become very complicated, and through that whole process, people are becoming more and more non-compliant. So if there's no enforcement, there's no compliance. So that's kind of one thing. The second one is my second point that they kind of questioned in here is an emergency. Like they said that the FMCSA didn't properly document what an emergency is. And I just ask myself when I see these videos, it's like, well, how many crashes do we have to see? How many people have to die? How many have to be injured before we can say there's an emergency. I mean, this is happening. The crashes are going up. They're public. I mean, it's all over the news. It's all over. There's videos all over YouTube and social media of just one after another, and they're not just videos. These same crashes are making headline news. So, at what point, like, how many crashes do we need to have before they'll actually say, yeah, there's an actual emergency? So, and then the last point that I have that I just want to remind everybody that I think we tend to believe it's our right to have a driver's license, and it is not. It is not a right. It is a privilege, and that privilege can be taken away from you if you're not going to follow the rules. So, we want good, safe drivers. We want drivers. We need y'all, but we need you to be safe out there, and we need to stop this nonsense that is just straight going on. With that being said, so. Yeah. So anyways, that's my thoughts on the matter, Keith. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I think 4 out of 4 signs is better than 3 out of 4. So
I agree.
Still agree.
I agree.
I still think that's the way that should be. You don't know them all, you're gone.
Yeah. Well, they're going to get 3. So but they hopefully made it through the interview first and before they got to the signs. So yeah. 2 different things.
I'll let you go last on TAFO of the week.
All right.
Mine's not a big one. One thing, we had a gentleman, I'm not going to say his name, but he was deleting trucks out of Greeley and been moved to Cheyenne and continued to delete trucks and was warned repeatedly. He wound up getting caught here, almost a year ago. And had to pay a $100,000 fine and 1 year in prison. And President Trump pardoned him, which I thought was interesting. Didn't think that would hit his radar, but that's kind of a TAFO. I mean,
so for some of our listeners that aren't familiar, can you kind of explain what deleting a truck means?
So deleting a truck is deleting the after treatment system that all these new trucks have to have on for all the new emissions, your diesel particulate filter and your DEF doser, your diesel exhaust fluid doser, all of that. He made it look like it was all on there, but it's just all hollow. There's nothing there. And people paid him a lot of money to do it, and a lot of these engines run better because of it. Yeah. But as coming at it from a dealer standpoint, I have to ask people, has your truck been deleted? Meaning the after treatment being altered in any way. If they have altered it, it either has to be put back to trade it back in, or I can't trade it in because I'm an authorized dealer. So EPA demands that. So, but I just thought that was very interesting. This guy was very well known in Greeley, very well known nationwide in high performance diesel engines and deleting.
Wow.
And so he got a pardon.
Well, I would say he must have been very well known for that to make that all the way up to Washington, D.C. So very interesting. Very interesting. Well, I'm sure there's a lot of different opinions on that topic. Especially since of the topic of the day and everything else that's going on. So we'll let y'all kind of mow that one over. That's surprising to me also. Well, my TAFO, the truck around and find out of the week, I'm going to go a little bit more off topic today. I'm going to try to have a little bit of fun with this. My wife, Holly, I'm sure she's going to be real thrilled that I'm throwing her under the bus on this one. But, honey, I mean everything in as good as I can say it, but I'm going to tell a little story about you. So first off, I want to say, hey, it's Thanksgiving, and I want to make sure that y'all should just, in my opinion, set aside your differences, your political views for the day, and just be thankful. Be thankful to be alive. Be thankful to live in a country that celebrates Thanksgiving and has so many other wonderful things. It is crazy times and that type of thing, but just take a day and take a break and just enjoy being with your family and quit worrying about the politics. The world is still turning, and we're all still living in a great country and in a great world. Love each other, enjoy the day, and hopefully, you're going to have some outstanding food. So a few years ago, Holly and I, we were in Jamaica. And we were splitting that last week of October and November, and we were kind of hanging out with a couple of our friends, Lando and Gayon, a young couple that we met in Jamaica and befriended them. And Delando and Gayon, they're working hard right now, recovering from the hurricane, but we've checked in on them and have been trying to help them out a little bit here and there. They're definitely got a lot of work ahead of them. But we were having a conversation. Holly was talking with Gayon, and we just kind of got on the topic of, holidays and upcoming things. And Holly had looked at Gayon and asked her what her family does for Thanksgiving. And I just kind of paused and I looked at Holly, and I can say that, of course, immediately she realized her mistake, that was just a United States tradition and holiday. But, it just kind of goes to show. And the point that I want to kind of bring forward this is just, it's something that we take for granted. We've got such a wonderful day like Thanksgiving. Not everybody in the world gets to celebrate a wonderful holiday like that. And I know some people have choice. I've things to say about the holiday and stolen land and everything else. And I just say stop, take a deep breath, and enjoy where you're at and be thankful for the blessings that we have bestowed upon us here in this wonderful country. So with that being said, I hope you all have a blessed week and a wonderful Thanksgiving. To all the drivers out there, that are working, thank you for all that you do. Because of you, our country and each of us are able to keep moving forward. So stay safe, keep our shiny side up, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
Hey, God bless you guys. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.